Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and in this episode, I'm going to be showing off another big batch of my complete run of Avengers. I'll be covering issues 101 through 150 this time. Last time I did the whole first 100 issues, but I had some feedback from some people that wanted me to break it up into smaller portions. So this time around, I'm going to be doing just 50 issues. Still probably going to take a while because I do like to talk a lot. I don't have quite as many stories with these necessarily as I do with the first 100 issues, but I do have some tales to spin. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to get right into it here. This is one of my higher grade issues. It is 101. It's hard to get these black covers, particularly the black frame covers, in high grade. This is a really nice copy. That's even worse. Let me try. The Mylar, it looks great in the Mylar, but it gives such a glare on the screen. But hopefully you can get an idea for this. It's got a little bit of scuffing near the spine on the top, but it's probably still at least an 8, maybe an 8.5. This era was actually the hardest for me to find. When I was putting together my complete run, the first issues like 101 through 115 or so were the most difficult for whatever reason. Again, this is pre-eBay. This is going back to late 80s, early 90s. So these were some of the really hard ones for me to find. Here's issue 102. I did a whole video about issue 102. I'll put a thing up here if you want to get the long version of the story. Here's my copy of 102, and the reason I did the video on it was to talk about the stories behind the signatures. This is the one issue of Avengers where I have it signed by the entire creative team. Down here we have writer Roy Thomas, penciler Rich Buckler, and the legendary Jolton Joe Sinnott, inker. It's a nice copy. Structurally, I say it's probably a mid-grade. It's got a little bit of wrinkling up here at the top, but mainly it's just faded a little bit. Like, when you look at these comics, you don't realize that they're gone to off-white until you see an actual white issue. When I get to 106, I'll show you a high-grade issue from this period that still is white, and the difference is dramatic. 103, another black frame cover. This one's not in nearly as nice shape. It's probably just like a 4. You don't think of the Sentinels as being Avengers villains, but this is part of a 3-part Sentinel storyline. This is the last gasp of Roy Thomas, and he had previously written X-Men, so I think that's why he was doing this. Here's issue 104. The last part of this storyline, Scarlet Witch front and center. Issue 5, we got another higher grade black frame cover. This one has a little bit of a dinging up here along the top edge. So it's a little bit lower grade than the 101, but it's still nice. It's probably at least a 7, maybe a 7.5. The Roy Thomas era comes to an end here. And then here is my copy of 106. Again, if I can find my 102 now, the difference in the whites, when you see them next to each other, see how much more pure white the 106 is compared to the 102. This is my second copy of 106. I used to have a really low grade copy. When I was getting them to read, to fill the numbers. I just wanted to read the stories, and once I've completed the run, I talked about this a little bit last time, I did go back and replace a number of my most beat up issues, upgraded them. It's not something I normally do, but with my Avengers run being so important to me, I wanted to clean up the really, really beat up ones. And so I found this really high grade 106 for a good price. It's really nice. It does have some spine ticks, but of course those don't jump out nearly as much because of the white cover. It's probably an 8.5. So next up we have issue 107. This one, again, I've got dual signatures here. I've got artist Rich Buckler and a writer Steve Englehart, who's taken over the series now as a writer from Roy Thomas. Really dig this cover. I actually really like a lot of Rich Buckler's covers more than his interiors. I think he has a really good cover design, an eye for covers. It's very dramatic with the oversized Grim Reaper. This is what I think of as the semi-frame. There's a couple months when they ended the frame, they had a couple months where they had the top was still blocked off. I really like these books from this era. #108, Space Phantom. Got the last cover appearance of Hawkeye in his absolutely idiotic man skirt. One of the worst costumes of all time. I love Barry Smith, but I think that was his design, and it's just horrible. #109, a little bit higher grade, maybe a 7. Again, we got the semi-frame. We get Hawkeye back in his original costume just in time to quit the team. And this led to an interesting period where Hawkeye was bouncing around as a guest star in a bunch of different books, a lot of them by Englehart. But after this, he appeared in Daredevil 99 as a guest star. He went into the Defenders for several issues. And there's a couple others I'm blanking on, but he sort of bopped around a little bit as a guest star for a while after this. #110, Gil Kane makes the scene as the cover artist. I love Gil Kane. I love this era of Marvel covers where Gil Kane was doing so many of the covers, and the X-Men. This is a very important book to me because this was the last issue of Avengers that I got to complete my run. I know it seems weird for this, of all things, to be the last issue, but I think part of it was the popularity of the X-Men, and the other part was that, again, pre-internet. So I eventually got down to just 2 issues. It was number 2 and number 110. I found a low-grade copy of 2 for $10. And so I was just on the hunt for 110, and there's actually a local show here in Worcester. There used to be these shows every couple of months at this little hotel. For those who know anything about Worcester, it's over by Lincoln Square. And I used to go over there. I got some cool stuff at those shows, including this. I finally found it, Avengers 110. It's a very, very exciting moment for me to complete my Avengers run. 111, second part of this crossover, we get guest appearance. Daredevil and the Black Widow are in here, and this is where Black Widow agrees to join the Avengers and then doesn't. It's weird. 113, the super dramatic, "You've killed the man I love and I will make you pay." This issue, the Vision is damaged by these anti-AI racists that hate robots, and they're trying to kill the Vision, and they severely damage him. And so because he's a synthetic man, basically Tony Stark and Don Blake team up to save him because they need both the technological expertise and the medical science to figure out how to fix him. And so this is the issue where Iron Man and Thor, it's revealed that they know each other's secret identities. That's established in this issue. becomes a plot point a couple times later. This issue cracks me up so bad because the bad guys, these terrorists, they have bombs that they're strapped to these vests, and then they have this headpiece with a giant plunger on top. And what they do is they run at the Avengers, and they go, oh, they run up, and then they hit the giant plunger on their head and explode and kill themselves. It's just so ridiculous. And there's a sequence where Thor like whips up a tornado, and a bunch of them get caught in the tornado, and the force of the wind accidentally detonates their head plungers, and they all blow up. Oh, it's so funny. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I accidentally skipped 112. Let me back up. 112 is the first appearance of Mantis. I happen to have a really nice copy. It's probably maybe an 8, maybe a 7.5. I think an 8's a good. I seriously dislike Mantis. I really don't like Mantis. And the big reason is here. Again, nice copy, 7.5, 114. Absolute definition of a Mary Sue introduction here, where Swordsman and Mantis show up at Avengers Mansion, and Mantis single-handedly defeats the entire team using jujitsu. Yes, Mantis beats Thor in a one-on-one fight because she knows martial arts, and she does like a Spock nerve pinch on him or something. I absolutely hate this where they have to establish, when the writers are like, let's establish how totally awesome and badass this character is by having them defeat all these super powerful established characters, and that way we can just skip all of the development and just you'll be impressed by how like awesome and important she is. I hate it. And it just really left a sour taste in my mouth. I just don't like Mantis. I hate the way she talks in the third person, saying this one about herself. Oh my gosh, it's so annoying. And Englehart's insistence on dragging Mantis around with him from one company to the next and including her in every one of his storylines is, to me, it's almost a fatal flaw for him as a writer. I think he does some really good work, but just knowing that at some point he's going to bring Mantis into it to continue his stupid Mantis obsession just drives me crazy. So, not a fan of that. I do like this run from Englehart, but it's not my favorite. I know a lot of people who absolutely consider him to be the best. 115, a nice copy of 115. Some of these are actually really nice. I did a very arbitrary cutoff of date, actually, when I get to the 25-cent books. This is pretty nice. It's probably a 6. When I was putting stuff in Mylar, I was like, I'm only going to put in high-grade books and only up until the end of the 20-cent era. So I have some really higher grade ones later on, but they're not in Mylars. Here's a decent copy of 116. I get the Avengers Defenders War starting here. Really cool storyline. This is another book that I upgraded. My original one had a really bad spine roll. Vision and Scarlet Witch versus the Silver Surfer. I mean, if this was being written today, the power levels of all the characters have gone wonky. But there was a time when the Vision was considered to be at about the same power level as the Silver Surfer. I love the Vision. Everyone else has had their power levels go through the ceiling. 117, it's a cool yellow cover. And we got the Avengers Defenders War continuing. We got, it's not exactly a floating head cover, but it's close. I do love my floating heads. 118, the end of the Avengers Defenders War. I do have all the Defenders issues. I should probably file them here with the Avengers, because anytime I want to read them, I've got to go into the other box and get them. It would be nice to show them here, I suppose. But, yeah, so I don't have them with me. They're over somewhere else. So, sorry about that. But here is Avengers of 118. The end of the Defender. If you haven't read the Avengers Defenders War, it's pretty good, but this is really cool because it's really it takes the ongoing storyline idea from the Kree Skrull War, and it adds the crossover element to it. So this is really the first big crossover event in comics. It was a storyline that went over 4 months because there was like an epilogue issue in Defenders. So 4 months crossing back and forth from Avengers to Defenders. So it had this epic feel. You had to buy both titles to get them. And then here in the climax, there's this really cool page where you have all of the other characters in the Marvel Universe that are reacting to what's happening, because like Dormammu is about to like invade Earth and destroy everything, and there's these little panels where you see Spider-Man and Luke Cage and like the Fantastic Four and all the other characters in the whole Marvel Universe get little cameos here, showing them reacting to how the world is being affected by the events of the story. And that's kind of, to me, it's a big milestone that's overlooked a little bit. 119, he's back with a vengeance, the man who collects superheroes. I'm a big fan of the Collector, so this is a cool one. 120, Zodiac. I like the storyline quite a bit, actually. I like the Zodiac and the Collector, so this has both of them. 121, Cornelius Van Lunt, who first appeared, I think, in Avengers 77 as just like a businessman. So Avengers are being menaced by big business, which is prophetic. But by this point, he's got a costumed identity. 122, I always like this cover. Not only does it have the yellow background, and not only is it a semi-frame, but it's got the cool thing where the characters are busting through the pages of the comic. So this is a really cool one. I like this one a lot. 123, we discover that Mantis' father is Libra, one of the members of the Zodiac. It turns out he's not actually exactly a supervillain. He's got his own agenda, which we learn about more here in 124. These issues are okay, but again, since I'm not a big fan of Mantis, they're important to sort of... I am a big fan of swordsmen, so there's a lot of stuff here that sets up what's going to come later on with them. So here is Avengers 125. Speaking of crossovers, this is a big one. Avengers, while this was going on and they're having all this big stuff, they were actually also appearing in another giant epic at the same time. But that was taking place over in the pages of Captain Marvel, where Jim Starlin was using the Avengers regularly as guest stars and making big cover appearances, major appearances, in the first big Thanos storyline. And that finally builds to a head and crosses over into Avengers 125 just for this one issue before going back to Captain Marvel to resolve that storyline. So I think this has become a bit of a minor key. It's the first Thanos Avengers cover. Thanos cover on Avengers. The Avengers appear on Thanos covers in Captain Marvel before this. But particularly given all the Thanos Avengers stuff in the movies, this one's gotten a lot more prominence recently. This is a nice copy. It's got a little bit of a roll, but it's pretty good. It's probably a 6.5 or 7. 126, whatever. These issues are just treading water for me. 126, this one in particular. 127 got a sweet date stamp, and more importantly, as you can see here, I have it's autographed by Gil Kane. I also have it autographed over here by Steve Englehart. I met Gil Kane at a comic book show in Orlando in 1998. And I had him autograph. I think I've got a couple more in here. I had him sign a few books. I don't like to bring a giant stack, particularly because I was on vacation in Florida. I usually only bring 2 or 3. I think I got Gil Kane's signature on 2 Avengers and 1 other book. And he passed away not too long after this, a couple years later. Steve Englehart's signature I got when I met him just a couple years ago in a Terrific Con in Connecticut. This issue is a crossover with Fantastic Four number 150 and the wedding of Quicksilver and Crystal. Here's 128. It's a Scarlet Witch spotlight issue. I think it's a little overlooked because this is the issue where she starts learning actual magic from Agatha Harkness. So instead of just being a mutant who has the name Scarlet Witch, she actually starts becoming a witch. I feel like they've kind of abandoned this in recent years, but whatever, I don't really follow Marvel anymore. An awesome book, one of my favorites, Avengers 129. At the beginning of the Celestial Madonna arc, I'm a huge fan of Kang. I love Kang. I think it's the best thing that Englehart did. I know a lot of readers at the time were really sick of Kang because Englehart was messing around with the ideas of having a time-traveling villain and what that would actually mean. But I love Kang. I love this cover so much, which is why I'm very excited to have it signed by cover artist Ron Wilson. I got to admit, I didn't even realize Ron Wilson had drawn this until he was at a show and I was looking to see what he had done. I also have an autograph by Steve Englehart. Love, love, love this cover. Great storyline. I do have, of course, all the giant-sized issues because this storyline crosses back and forth between the regular series and giant-sized Avengers. Here's 130. This is a beat-up copy. Notable, I guess, in that Steve Rogers appears in here, but not as Captain America, as Nomad, during the very brief period where he was Nomad. 131, the first appearance of the Legion of the Unliving. Almost all of these characters have been brought back from the dead since, so whoops. But it's got Wonder Man brought back, original Human Torch brought back. It's got Frankenstein, thematically appropriate. Really dead? I don't know. So anyway, Legion of the Unliving. Here we go. 132. It's Thor fighting Frankenstein. So that's cool. 133. Celestial Madonna storyline is going strong at this point. And then 134 and 135. We get the expanded origin of the Vision, where we discovered that he was built using parts from the original Human Torch. That was later retconned when they brought back the original Human Torch. They retconned that to say that he was built from spare parts. He wasn't actually built from the Human Torch's parts, but like from this extra parts, so they're separate instead of being the same. But in this original origin, and this was building off of some stuff that happened in Avengers 93, an offhand comment. But there's all this stuff. It's a bit of a Roy Thomas-esque data dump where they're just like watching Marvel history and seeing all this stuff. But 135 sort of ends the origin of the Vision. And this is essentially the end of the Celestial Madonna, because this goes into Giant Size Avengers 4, and that ends that storyline. So beginning of the next issue, we get a whole new era. First of all, it's a reprint. We're going to see a couple of these because Englehart's going to start missing his deadlines. This one is a reprint of Amazing Adventures 12, I think, where the new Blue Beast fights Iron Man. The original has a really cool yellow frame cover. This is still cool. It's got an arrival date on it. I'm not sure I noticed that before. I think it's... Yeah, so this is a reprint, and doesn't initially seem like it has anything to do with anything, but it's actually setting up the Beast joining the Avengers. Beast and Moondragon both join here. So Englehart's got his new direction that he's starting to take after he's finished all the Celestia Madonna. He killed off Swordsman. He got rid of Mantis, thank goodness. And so now he's bringing in some new team members to replace them and shake things up. 138, don't have a lot of memories, to be honest, of these issues here. I do know that 139 and 140 were difficult ones for me to find. Again, this section here, the first, 101 to 115 was probably the really hard parts for me, but this whole era was among the most difficult for me to get for the complete. Out of all the issues in the entire series, 101 to 140 were the real sticking points. And here's 140, some Gil Kane inking on the cover. I've told the story in the previous video, but a big cornerstone of my collection is I got some investment money one year for Christmas, and I use it to invest in Avengers. And I bought, I ordered away in the mail for issues 17 to 56 and 141 to 180. So here's 141, and I have a lot of regrets about this one because it's, okay, here's the cool part. It's got Steve Englehart's signature here, but I also have it signed by George Perez. This is George Perez's first issue. And it also begins the Serpent Crown storyline with the Squadron Supreme. It says Squadron Sinister on the cover, but it's actually the Squadron Supreme. And so this is like another classic Steve Englehart storyline. He has got the Avengers Defenders War, he's got the Celestia Madonna, and then he's got the Serpent Crown storyline here, which is really great. My regret is that at the show in Orlando, where I had this signed by George Perez, I somehow blanked on the fact that the cover is actually Gil Kane, which is obvious if you look at the Wizard here. It's obviously Gil Kane, but for some reason I missed that, and I didn't get it signed by Gil Kane when he was there. Got other books signed by him, but not this one, and that's I always regretted that. Yeah. 142. This is a cool story where half of the team goes to the Old West, time traveling to battle Kang, while the other half of the team goes to the Squadron Supreme's Earth. It's funny because this cover here, it's got this blurb saying, "At last, the final battle against the power of Kang," except for the cover's not showing that. This is the group of Avengers that are doing the Serpent Crown storyline. The other team in the Old West that are facing off against Kang, who apparently dies in this issue in the Old West, is Thor and Moondragon and Hawkeye, who's returned to the book briefly. And then at the end of this story, when the Avengers come back to the present, the Two-Gun Kid comes to the present with them, which opens up a whole can of worms that Marvel writers have been messing around with for quite a while. 144, a little bit of a minor key here. It's the first appearance of Hellcat. Patsy Walker's been on the periphery of this book for a while. Brought over as a supporting character from the pages of Amazing Adventures, where Steve Englehart had been using her, had brought her into the Marvel Universe. Her original stories, of course, were sort of like Archie-esque teen humor. But then it was retcon that those are all comic books based on the life of an actual person in the Marvel Universe, the real Patsy Walker. And so in this issue, she gets the costume that previously belonged to Greer Nelson the Cat, and she becomes Hellcat in this issue. And then we get two more fill-in issues, a two-part fill-in. Englehart missed this deadline again They interrupt this epic storyline for this random story that has nothing to do with the rest of it. It does have this cool cover from Gil Kane, though. If this looks familiar to anyone, look at it, think about it. Have you seen this before? It might be because Rob Liefeld swiped this design for the cover of New Mutants 87, the first appearance of Cable. Instead of the cards, he, has the bullet, like the gun sights, so they're round. But yeah, take a look. This is the cover that Rob Liefeld was ripping off when he did New Mutants 87 for the first Cable. This storyline is whatever. There is a cool part where the Avengers get poisoned and Hawkeye manages to save himself by forcing himself to vomit into a trash can. So anytime you get that... Oh yeah, here's the other issue, the second part, which has the gun sight. So if you're wondering how Rob Liefeld came up with the one bit of innovation on his cover and went with the gun sights, you don't have to look too far, because the next issue has got that. And then finally that's over with and we're back. We're back to the real storyline where the Serpent Crown saga is reaching its climax. And we also get here the return of Jack Kirby doing the covers on Avengers. He's just come back to Marvel. There's a period where they're having Kirby doing a bunch of covers because it was a big deal. He was back at Marvel. His art at this point looks very different than it used to. But here's a very sort of classic 70s style Kirby cover where the Avengers have been defeated by the Squadron Supreme. And what really happens in here is that it turns, basically the Squadron Supreme, they've all been mind controlled by the Serpent Crown, and the Avengers managed to snap them out of it. And while they're mind controlled, they basically took over the country. And the Avengers snap them out of it, and they're like, oh my god, what do we do? What do we do now? And that is explored many years later in Mark Gruenwald's Squadron Supreme miniseries, where the team, which is obviously the Justice League, have to decide what to do now once they're free of the mind control, but they've taken over the country, and so instead of being a democracy, they're the de facto rulers of the country. And what they decide to do is actually to stay in power as sort of because they think that they can enact all of these societal reforms, and it ends up spectacularly backfiring. Great series, great series. All set up here, issue 148. 149, I've got a little bit of an interesting story with this. This is one of the few downgrades in my collection. This is a really beat up, it's even got a big tear here. I used to have a much nicer copy that was actually a price variant. So you can see it says up here, still only 25 cents. I happen to have the 30-cent price variant. And at some point when I was going through my collection, I was like, I don't care about these price variants. So I sold that for like $25. Bought this $3 reader replacement, and then bought more comics with the rest of the money. So, yeah, it's one of the very few downgrades in my collection. And then last for this episode, it's Avengers 150, one of the worst anniversary issues of all time, because Steve Englehart got fired halfway through doing it. Supposedly, again, missing his deadlines, I don't know, but basically what happens is it starts off as the Avengers are having this meeting to determine their new lineup, and then it segues into a reprint of Avengers 16 showing the first time they had a big lineup change. And that's it. That's the whole issue. That's the end of the very sad and sudden end of Steve Englehart's legendary run of Avengers is just partway through this book. It just disappears, and they replace it with a reprint. And then when you get to the next issue, which I'll show in my next video, Jerry Conway, the new editor-in-chief at Marvel, takes over as writer, and we get a new lineup, completely new direction, writes out like everything that Engelhart was doing just goes a totally different direction. But that's for next time, assuming that people still want to watch more of these. Of course, I have a full run of Avengers up to issue 502, so can do plenty more. So next time we look at Avengers, whenever that is, I'll cover issues 151 to 200. Yeah, that's it for this time. Thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.